Apple's appeal of a lower court ruling in the long-running ebook price-fixing case. NPR's Lynn Neary has that story.
The Justice Department says today's decision means Apple's liability in the price-fixing case is, quote, settled once and for all. The Supreme Court let stand a $450 million settlement reached in a lower court in 2014. The lower court determined that Apple had conspired with 5 publishers to illegally set the price of electronic books. Today's decision by the High Court means Apple must pay the bulk of the settlement, $400 million, to consumers who bought ebooks at the higher price set by Apple and the publishing companies. The Justice Department says most consumers will be reimbursed through automatic credits at their ebook retailers. Lynn Neary, NPR News, Washington.
Most economists who took part in a recent survey say they think the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates further this year, but their views on the Fed's policy stance appear more divided. A poll conducted by the National Association of Business Economics finds 41% of those surveyed feel the Fed's current policy is overly restrictive. Only about 29% felt that way back in August. Stocks moved between slight gains and losses as the new trading week began. The Dow was up 67 points to close at 17,073. The Nasdaq was down 8 points. This is NPR.
And this is WNYC in New York. I'm Sean Carlson. Mayor de Blasio has signed an executive order affirming that all city-run agencies and facilities, including public pools, must allow people to use bathrooms and locker rooms that are consistent with their gender identity. Andre St. Clair is a transgender woman who says having to use the bathroom causes great anxiety.
For me, I should be able to go to the women's bathroom and not feel as though like I can't even speak in there. Out of fear somebody would think my voice is too deep to be in there.
A city law already exists that prohibits denying people access to bathrooms because of their gender. The city says the executive order reinforces and clarifies the current law. To comply with the order, the city will begin to post signs informing the public and will provide training for staff. An obscure but influential New Jersey agency is drawing scrutiny over its spending. That's according to the Star Ledger. The New Jersey Schools Insurance Group is the largest of more than 40 public agencies that insure state government. The paper says between 2012 and early 2015, more than $150,000 in taxpayer money appears to have been spent on questionable items, ranging from liquor store charges to tip 2 trips to a Philadelphia Phillies game. And in other New Jersey news, the New York Times reports former New Jersey Attorney General Robert Del Tufo has died. His wife, Catherine Del Tufo, says the federal prosecutor died of lung cancer Wednesday in Princeton when he was 82. The Newark-born son of Italian immigrants served as U.S. Attorney General for New Jersey from 1977 to 1980. He's best known for being the lone voice of dissent in prosecutions following the federal sting operation known as the Abscam investigation, suggesting the FBI had entrapped a participant. And maybe they confused the Empire State with the Evil Empire. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio suggested the force was not strong with the City Hall staffer who placed the symbol for Star Wars' Galactic Empire next to all state agencies in the official city directory. It was the latest salvo in the ongoing rivalry between de Blasio and Governor Andrew Cuomo. De Blasio said today that it was a silly thing to do. He said the culprit has yet to be identified. The presence of the imperial crest in the city's online directory, known as the Green Book, was first reported by the New York Post. A spokesman for Cuomo teased that the prank's lack of originality was disturbing. It's 5:06.
Support for NPR comes from RingCentral, a cloud-based business phone system. RingCentral allows companies to add employees or offices as they grow and utilize cell phones and other devices as corporate phones. Learn more at ringcentral.com.
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Ari Shapiro.
And I'm Kelly McEvers. We barely got through this weekend's primary contests, and now there are more tomorrow. 4 states will have their say: Hawaii, Mississippi, Idaho, and Michigan, where blue-collar voters have kept Donald Trump ahead in the polls. Here's Trump today speaking about his chances.
I've been to Michigan a lot, and I think we're going to do well there. And we have Idaho. We love Idaho potatoes, right?
Ted Cruz did well over the weekend. He is fewer than 100 delegates behind Trump now. And today at campaign stops like this one in Mississippi, Cruz raised more questions about the frontrunner.
And we saw at the last debate where Donald stood up over and over again and said he would be flexible on immigration.
Stand strong.
Now let me tell you right now, flexible is Washington, D.C. code word for we're about to stick it to them.
Joining us now to discuss the latest turns in the Republican race is NPR national political correspondent Mara Liasson. Welcome back, Mara.
Glad to be here.
Before we turn to the Republican race, some news in what one might call a possible independent race. Just this afternoon, breaking about Michael Bloomberg.
Bloomberg says he is not going to enter the 2016 race. So that solves one of the biggest mysteries. Everybody's been on the edge of their seats waiting for Bloomberg to decide, but he's not going to run.
Well, then to the Republicans, is this looking like a basically two-man race now between Trump and Cruz?
I think it is. The two of them certainly think so. They both are calling for Marco Rubio and John Kasich to drop out. Cruz actually won more delegates this weekend than Trump did, and he has emerged as the clear alternative to Trump. But when you look beyond tomorrow to March 15th, where Ohio and Florida vote, and even beyond that to New Jersey, New York, California, Illinois, the landscape looks more hospitable to Trump than Cruz.
So over the weekend, Cruz won Kansas and Maine, while Trump won Kentucky and Louisiana, but Trump's margins of victory in those states were not as big as he might have liked. What do you make of that?
No, they weren't huge, and they were also way below what he was polling in those states. And there are a couple possible reasons for that. Trump is for the first time the target of many millions of dollars of negative ads, and we know that all along late deciders have tended to break against Trump. People who decide early on for him tend to stick with him, but this weekend the late deciders broke against Trump by even greater margins. Also, Kansas and Maine were caucuses. That favors ground organization. That's what Cruz has and what Trump doesn't have, or what he hasn't been willing to spend his own money to get. And we're seeing a trend that Trump does worse in closed primaries when only Republican registered voters can vote, because Trump gets a lot of support from crossover Democrats and independents.
The establishment has been working so hard to keep Trump from getting this nomination, but Cruz is not exactly beloved by the establishment either.
No, this is an excruciating choice for many Republican establishment figures. Senator Lindsey Graham, for instance, no fan of Cruz's, thinks rallying behind Cruz is the best bet. Another relatively moderate Republican senator told me privately he'd rather have Trump as president than Cruz. This is a very, very tough choice. One is unpredictable. The other candidate is really despised.
And who do the Republicans you're talking to think has a better chance against a Democratic nominee in November?
Well, there's no consensus. Many Republicans think Cruz is way too far right to win. Trump's path to the White House would be very unorthodox. It would involve flipping a lot of blue states to red, increasing turnout among non-college educated whites, those poorly educated people Trump says he loves. He'd have to raise their turnout to record-breaking levels in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. Trump talks about this all the time. He says no normal Republican can win Michigan, but he can.
NPR's Mara Liasson. Thanks, Mara.
Thank you.
Last night, on the Democratic side of the campaign, Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton met for a debate in Flint, Michigan. They talked about the ongoing water crisis in the city, and they talked a lot about race. Some of the ways the candidates talked about race last night have been criticized. We have NPR's Sam Sanders here with us to make sense of it all. Hey, Sam.
Hey there.
So, what happened last night? There was one particular moment that stood out, right? Tell us about it.
Yes. So, towards the end of the CNN debate in Flint, Don Lemon of CNN asked Sanders and Clinton what their, quote, racial blind spots are. And they both seemed to give pretty thoughtful answers, but one part of Sanders' response stood out.
When you're white, you don't know what it's like to be living in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be poor. You don't know what it's like to be hassled when you walk down the street or you get dragged out of a car.
So you could tell that he meant well, but it was very clunky. You know, lots of white people are poor too, and not all black people are poor, and not all black people live in ghettos. And even the use of the word ghetto is seen by some as problematic and a bit racially coded. This was a tough moment for Sanders, who was doing all he can to really appeal to black voters ahead of Michigan's primary on Tuesday night.
So what do these comments say about where Sanders as a candidate stands on race? I mean, where he stands with black voters?
So I spoke with Andra Gillespie. She studies race and politics at Emory University, and she says those comments reveal a problem that he's had for some time this campaign. Sanders seems to see the world through an economic prism.
That's kind of the fundamental problem between some blacks and white progressives, is this notion that white progressives think about class so much that they forget that there's class diversity within African American communities, and that there are ways that racism affects blacks regardless of their class status.
And when it comes to talking about race and politics, Sanders seems to be a bit newer at this. He is from Vermont, a state that is very, very white, and he was active during the civil rights movement, but that was decades ago. Clinton has a longer history in the South and speaking to black voters, and her husband does too. It's kind of like speaking a language. If you spend lots of time doing it and have been doing it for a while, you'll just be better at it. And I think that when it comes to speaking about race and politics, Sanders is just newer at this.
Well, let's be clear. Hillary Clinton got tripped up a bit last night too, right? I mean, but in a different kind of way. Tell us about that.
Yeah, she faced some policy questions over her support of some of her husband's policies. The crime bill in '94, the welfare reform bill in 1996. Lots of critics say that those two policies hurt black families and sent more black men to prison. She did say in hindsight some parts of those policies were wrong. But for the last several elections, those bills were either forgotten or seen as wins for Democrats. This issue has been seeming to catch her off guard the entire election.
And what are we supposed to learn from all this?
I mean, so it underscores how important the black vote is to Democrats. They make up a large portion of primary voters in many of these key states. And we have to note how much more this side of the race has been spending talking about race than the GOP side. They don't talk about it that much at all. And what I found interesting last night was watching this. It would be hard for me to imagine 08 Obama having as much space to talk about race the way that Clinton and Sanders did. He was so guarded about race and about being seen as acceptable and moderate. He wouldn't have been allowed to have those conversations, I think.
That's NPR's Sam Sanders. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right, so if you are sick of politics, we have a couple of big sports stories for you today. First, one of pro football's greatest players is saying goodbye to the game. Denver Broncos quarterback Peyton Manning announced his retirement 18 years after playing his first game in the NFL and a month after winning the Super Bowl. Also today, a major announcement from top-ranked tennis player Maria Sharapova. NPR sports correspondent Tom Goldman is following both stories, and he is with me now in the studio. So, Tom, let's talk about Peyton Manning. I hear he made the announcement at a news conference. He's known for control on the field, but we saw a different side of him today.
We sure did. From the beginning, when he stepped to the microphone, Manning spoke like he had a big lump in his throat. He never cried, but he got close as he talked about all the people, so many people in 18 years, and really before the NFL and college, the people that helped shape his career. And it's a career, as you say, that will be defined by control. He was like a coach at the line of scrimmage, actually like a coach and an orchestra conductor. Those who watched him will remember the wild waving of the arms, screaming out real and imagined plays. Omaha, Omaha, remember that? One of those audibles that captured the country's imagination a couple of years ago. He said, don't believe the pundits who described him as some genius in shoulder pads. He said his success was just as much a function of hard work.
Because every moment, every drop of sweat, every bleary-eyed night of preparation, every note I took, and every frame of film I watched was about one thing: reverence for this game.
You hear a little sniffle there. Yeah. That approach to the game, Kelly, is a reason he's considered a lock for the Hall of Fame.
Well, let's talk about the records and the accomplishments. There are so many of them, yeah?
Certainly are. His teams, the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos, made the playoffs 15 of his 18 years. He won 2 Super Bowls, most recently last month against Carolina. There were critics who said he should have gotten to and won more Super Bowls. He even had a tag as a guy who couldn't deliver consistently in the postseason. Okay, if that's true, he still has to be one of the best, if not the best, regular season quarterbacks in history. And the numbers back that up. He was the all-time leader in touchdown passes, passing yards, wins by a quarterback.
So why retire now?
You know, this is what he was looking at. He turns 40 this month, declining skills, injuries that kept him out of action for nearly half of this past regular season. Also, there's a possibility of him playing as a backup, kind of a slow death, and they don't like that when they've been a starter their whole career. And for the first time, he was facing off-field controversy, an allegation from 20 years ago at the University of Tennessee about possible sexual harassment, which he denied again in the press conference today, an investigation into alleged use of the banned substance human growth hormone. He was asked why now and whether any of these factors played a bigger role than others. He kept it close to the vest, said only it was time.
Okay, let's get to Maria Sharapova. She, the former #1 ranked tennis player, had her own news conference today to say she tested positive for a banned substance. Tom, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, 28 years old, winner of 5 Grand Slam singles titles. She failed a doping test at this year's Australian Open in January. She said she takes full responsibility for that failed test. She said for the past 10 years she's been taking a medicine legally that was not banned, but the medicine was just put on the prohibited list by the World Anti-Doping Agency, which Sharapova said she wasn't aware of. The drug is meldonium. used to treat heart issues. Sharapova says she started taking it after she had some irregular EKGs. The International Tennis Federation says it will provisionally suspend her until they figure out what the final penalty will be.
It's NPR sports correspondent Tom Goldman on the retirement of Peyton Manning and an admission by Maria Sharapova that she took a banned substance. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dramatically in recent generations.
In my father's time, when he went to school, there were fewer than half of all Indian children.
Center, offering cancer treatments such as immunotherapy and GPS-guided surgery, and working to find new ways to customize
Borders recalls last year's attack on a hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan.
For me, and
in Michigan, Mississippi, Hawaii, and Idaho. Here are results and analysis from NPR starting at 9 o'clock. High near 62. It's sunny on Wednesday with a high near 68. It's 60 right now in Central Park at 5:20.
giving 400 million users the power to protect their money, privacy, networks, PCs, and mobile devices.
The youngest country in the world, with 365 million people between the ages of 10 and
opportunity for both men and women, and I would argue particularly women who have really not enjoyed